Welcome, everybody, into the Valley. I am Ethan Shutt, joined as always by Philip Russell and Ryan Shutt. We are coming at you Monday night. So we're going to do our best to kind of recap what we've seen so far over the weekend. A lot of good stuff, and also give some updates about Game 2 tomorrow. But want to go ahead and start by saying those that are listening, those that are watching, thank you very much. We know there are a million different Suns media outlets going on right now, and everything's kind of kicking it into full gear. So those that are listening, thank you. Feel free to hop down to the comments with any questions you've got. Feel free to subscribe if that's something you're into. But also just shout out to all the other Suns podcasts, Suns writers. Too many to mention, but so many people doing some really good stuff. And if we manage to make it on your list of things you're listening to, we appreciate it. Guys, we are riding an 8-game win streak, which is incredible. The longest win streak of the Suns' entire season, which is saying something when you have the second best record in the entire league. But game 1, Phoenix wins 120-114. Honestly, maybe this is too much to say. The game was super close. The game was tied going into the fourth. But with about 3 minutes left, it felt like the Suns could have run away, kind of fumbled the bag last second to make it way closer than needed to be, but not one where you were too terrified going down the stretch. Philip, to you first. We all were able to watch that game. We've officially moved past the Nuggets. I think it's very clear this is going to be a very different series from Denver. Even just the strengths and weaknesses of each team are so different. What were your initial thoughts to seeing this series play out in game 1?
I was surprised how easy a lot of the Suns' offense looked. The very first note I wrote watching the game was the Suns are getting pretty much only good looks, and I just kind of kept track of that. The first possession I really didn't love was almost 5 full minutes into the game, where I thought the Clippers actually exerted their will a little bit on defense, but really throughout the whole game, the Suns got great looks, and they got, obviously Booker is going to be a storyline, but they got them from a variety of ways.
Ryan, what stood out to you the most game 1?
Playoff P is having the highlight of his career so far when it comes to the playoffs. I feel like he has finally got that monkey off of his back when it comes to the slander that I often give him. And he's showing up, and he the only reason that game was as close as it was is because he played so well.
Philip, I gotta ask a quick question just with Ryan's point. As not an Indiana guy, I know you are closer growing up there with those hoops. In my mind, when Ryan said finally showing up in the playoffs, I feel like during the Pacers days, he did work. Am I misremembering? But I feel like him and LeBron had those battles, and that slump kind of came
but
with
since
the
then,
Thunder and Clippers,
ago.
Right?
Yeah, but that's been years at this point.
Yeah, it is weird. It's weird how that slump even happened, how that even started after leaving Indiana, because it was with him and Russ were always a weird one. But no, Ryan, I agree with you. I mean, statistically speaking, he was the only player that in my mind played a really good game. But even that was shooting 10 of 26 from the field.
That caught my attention. Yeah, going back. So I rewatched the game this afternoon, and then I looked at the box score, and I thought he shot under 40%. I think his play in the third and then a couple big plays in the fourth probably covered up his lack of efficiency, but that really caught me off guard that he shot such a poor percentage.
I think what it was for me, because I thought the same thing. I was reading the box score this morning, kind of getting the refresher of like, all right, what does the eye test tell me? Okay, what do the numbers tell me? Rewatching some during my workday. And I think the reason it felt like he was as on fire as he was is because he was 7 of 15 for 3. I think when you see someone hit that many threes without it being a 7 of like 29 type of thing, you know what I mean? Old school Rocket 3-point numbers. Like, it felt like he was hitting a lot. And I think a lot of it is because he kept hitting those kind of tourniquet shots to stop the bleeding. Every time the Suns looked like there was a chance to pull away, he would hit that 3 that says like, all right, this is still a game. And the back and forth between him and Booker was incredible. But anyway, statistically speaking, it was a really weird one. Just looking at the Clippers first, there were one, two, three, four guys in the positive, with the biggest negative in terms of plus minus going to Rondo at minus 14. That kind of surprised me as well, just in terms of Rondo's playoff efficiency in the past, how well he played against the Suns in the past. But the biggest surprise for me on the Clippers end was the utilization of DeMarcus Cousins. I didn't expect him to get any minutes, let alone, and this is another funny thing, if I told you he only played 13 minutes, would that surprise you? Because it surprised me. I felt like he was on the court more. And I think
he just
maybe
had that one good stretch. What was it in the second quarter where he had I think
so
7 or 8 straight points. Right, but after that, he kind of spent a lot of time. Plus, didn't he get in foul trouble too once we started attacking late third, early fourth?
Yeah, he ended with 5 fouls, but that was a wrinkle that I didn't even expect to see out of the Clippers, to be honest. Hadn't seen much of him and didn't know really what to expect. I think what we saw made sense. Hitting the three, he can do that. Taking care of the cleanup type stuff under the post, but what we also come to expect is by the third quarter, he's going to look gassed. And that's even more surprising when I'm like, oh, he only played 14 minutes or 13 minutes. He looked like toast, man, at the end. And I hate that for him. I love him. I loved him in Kentucky. Wish his career would have gone a different way, but he looked gassed playing just over 10 minutes.
He had enough to bury Dario at one point, though. Poor Dario got sent 7 feet into the ground off a boogie dunk.
I mean, what's the height advantage, though? I mean, that's got to he's got to have him by a good bit. But anyway, anything else on the Clippers end of things kind of stand out to you, Philip?
Yeah, their second unit is rough right now. One of the reasons that Boogie got so much playing time is because they were looking for any kind of mismatch that they could find in the second unit. Right before we started recording, I made a joke about how Marcus Morris looked like the offensive focal point of the second unit at one point when he was trying to post up whoever was on him. And if Marcus Morris is your guy and you're going to clear out for Marcus Morris, your offense is in pretty rough shape. And I think that's why Boogie might have been in there during this game, is they were looking for any kind of easy offense that they could get. And I think in their coach's mind, maybe those post-ups were where they were going to get to exploit the Suns in a one-on-one setting and not allow the Suns swarming defense that we saw throughout the game to kind of take hold of their possessions.
I think part of it too, when I was thinking about the Clippers and even just earlier in the playoffs, the second unit was not something that jumped out to me super duper loud as like, this is a massive thing to exploit. And I think that's just because they had Kawhi. And so if you're staggering Paul George and Kawhi, you don't get that full feel of, whoa, those 5 guys are out there while Marcus Morris is the one getting the ball here. And you see that when Kawhi's not out there and they can't stagger. And so when Paul George leaves the court, I mean, the entire talent level drops significantly. And I think that is something impressive about the Suns as we kind of turn and look at them for a second. We've talked all year about the incredible depth, even to the point where we're saying, hey, we have too many good guys. Who's going to crack this playoff rotation? And that drop off when Booker leaves the court is just not even remotely close to the Clippers drop off when Paul George leaves. Like the 5 that are out there when Booker's not there is still a really good starting 5 anywhere. And that just, to me, really, really makes the James Jones Executive of the Year thing make a lot of sense. And I think Monty probably had a whole lot to do with who was coming in the door as well, to be honest. I think they did a great job of being incredibly upfront with people. I think it was, a couple weeks ago, an article came out where it was talking about they basically told some free agents no, in the sense of, this will be your role here. Are you okay with it? We're not giving out minutes to guys that don't get minutes. Monty talked about with guys like Javon Carter and Langston having those hard talks come playoff time where they knew their role and that was it. But even with that, they were able to build such a deep team that the 5 that the Suns have on the court when they lose their best player, not even mentioning that Chris Paul's not out there, I never felt concerned. Even when Paul George was on the court hitting shots, there was not one part of me that said how they're constructed, again, without Kawhi. And I think that's the caveat that will probably get repeated multiple times, even though it is what it is. without Kawhi, I'm not concerned about this team. And we talked Jazz, Clippers, who do we want? Who do we want? After watching game one, and again, Kawhi's injury is still up in the air. Ryan, are you happy that we're playing the Clippers, even though they beat the Jazz in 6?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the way our team is built compared to this Clippers team, I think we saw it. DeAndre Ayton put up a much better fight against this team than Rudy Gobert did. They are obviously not the same player. Now, obviously, Rudy's the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, but Ayton was doing things to the Clippers that Gobert we didn't really see. So even that alone, I feel pretty comfortable. I think our bench has proven to be much deeper. So yeah, I'm feeling good about this matchup. And to your point, I think the Clippers we saw on Sunday might be the best this Clippers team can be. And if that's the case, I'm feeling all right. I don't know they can play much better than what we saw Sunday without Kawhi Leonard. And then if you take Marcus Morris off the table, who's questionable right now, he's good in the post. He can shoot the ball pretty well. I don't see them besting us in 7 games. I don't see it happening. And that's a comfortable place to be.
Well, and one of their big problems without Morris then is going to be that small ball lineup is almost impossible to run.
Yeah.
And here's a domino effect of how basketball works. Okay, Marcus Morris is out. Oh, we can put Zubac in or we can put Cousins in. That's when the Suns will absolutely cook the Clippers. And you see it if they blitz. Ayton did a great job in kind of the high post right around the nail, making decisions, had a couple great passes out of double teams when Booker was getting double teamed. If they drop like they have to do when Boogie's on the court because they can't have him scrambling around the court, Booker gets to his mid-range spots and they don't have the guards who are big enough really to contest Booker's mid-range. So without Morris, they are in deep trouble based off of what they like to do as a team.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Russ.
I was just going to say, I also feel pretty confident because, Ethan, while you and I were watching together, we both noted that the first 2 quarters, there definitely was some sleep in the eye for the Suns, it felt like. They felt a little rusty. That week off seemed like it wasn't allowing them to operate on all cylinders from the jump, whereas the Clippers were literally coming off essentially a day and a half rest and are functioning at peak in-game form. And it took the Suns a little bit to get into it. And if that's the case, if we're getting back our rhythm game 2, I think the Clippers are in for a long series.
And by long series, I assume you mean a very painful short series?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I the only thing with the Clippers that concerns
long emotionally, spiritually, interpersonally,
I feel that. No, I think the only way the and maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid way too much. And if this happened and Kawhi's out there, I think I'm realistic enough to know that this would be a ridiculously different conversation. But the way the Clippers are currently constructed, the only way I think they win a game is if they just have a stupid good 3-point shooting night. Because the way they're built, I'm not concerned with them doing anything on the inside. But what's crazy to me is they shot almost 43% on 47 attempts. That's great. Like I don't foresee you getting a whole lot better than that. I mean, realistically, maybe you have one night where you're like 45, 47%, but still like that's absurd to begin with, right? I mean, if your team's hitting 40% as a group, throwing up 47, you expect to be in it. And again, to the credit, it was a 6-point win and it was a tight game. I don't want it to be like, hey, the Suns blew them out. There's not a chance. I just think from what we saw, there's no reason to think this formula can't be repeated because I don't even think the Suns had their best game. Like I think Devin Booker played one of his best top 3 performances I've ever seen out of him. Honestly, a great case for number 1, given what was on the line. First triple-double, which that still blows my mind. The fact that that's never happened as his assists have continued to go up. I guess the rebounding thing, he's not really the guy that usually grabs it off the boards and starts the break. It looked like that was an intentional change, potentially. Get it into his hands without Chris Paul and have him immediately taking it down. But looking at the box score, it's the Suns one it's a weird one. Again, like Cam Payne, who I thought did a great job filling in for Chris Paul, 11 points, nothing crazy, but 9 assists. So he filled that role. We didn't need him to be the spark plug, even though I think maybe we were afraid he would try to be. And he kind of tried to get it going early, and it didn't work. And so what did he do? He said, I'm going to change. I'm going to drive and kick. I'm going to drive and dump. And I'm like, Philip, we were talking about this Sunday right after the game. How many of those drives and then little like hook pass over the shoulder, weird turnaround dumps, like they had to have done that like 6 or 7 times with the Clippers having no idea what to do. And if you don't mind going full nerd mode on me, we had this conversation. For those listening, explain to them kind of what was happening, because that seemed to be the play that beat the Clippers, and they just kept doing it over and over again. So just kind of explain what the Suns were doing there and attacking the Clippers defense like that.
Yeah, so there's an idea and a play that a lot of teams run where you could do, let's say you do a pick and roll on the right side of the court. So the ball handler's on the right side. There are a lot of teams that will float a shooter to the left-hand corner as the ball handler's driving, and you're essentially setting yourself up for a wraparound pass around the baseline. But that pass is done enough that several times in the first half, the Clippers were completely sold out on the baseline. So they were completely cutting off the Suns from getting a pass to the strong side corner or even the weak side corner. But if you count, that takes 1 defender in one corner, 2 in another corner, and they had 2 defenders chasing the ball as well. And then mathematically, the way the possessions were setting up, the only person then who could be open in the lane was DA every time. So the Clippers were selling out to the ball handler, selling out to the corners to not allow that layup or the corner 3. But then the shot that they wound up giving up was a dunk to Aiden. And that happened several times throughout the first half, especially.
Typically, at least in the Denver series, I feel like that corner 3 roll, that shooter on the left side you're talking about, is typically going to be Bridges. Cam Johnson fills that role a lot, and that's where they're getting their corner 3s. It's you penetrate, you bring the defense in, you suck them in, and then it opens space on the outside. And as long as you have a competent passer, a guy who can see what's going on a couple steps ahead, with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, you've got that. But to see Cam Payne, in my opinion, be so aware of what's going on and know how to react, because you didn't hurt. I don't remember, at least. I remember Cam doing a few little like wraparound passes underneath to Ayton early on, but not the consistent, I'm going to attack this weak point and exploit it repeatedly. And he impressed me a lot. Like he really, really stood out to me, not just in this game, but as someone who's continuing to show that maybe there's a little bit more future potential in him as a starting point guard down the road if he can continue to grow in some other areas. But I mean, I think game 1 is as well as possible. I was really scared they were going to lay an egg, and I also thought there was a chance the Clippers had legs that would just kind of die, and you could see it blow out one way or another. So seeing a close game after the Denver series was a little bit of a different experience, at least as a fan, I would say. But looking ahead, Booker, obviously, I'm not going to expect him to do that every time. So let's go ahead and strike him from the conversation. Are there any players in this game 1 that you felt played so out of their minds that they can't do it again? And I do have an eventual point with this. But were there anyone on the Suns that you were like, wow, that is absurd. Wow, I never would see that again? I think there's maybe one answer. But
are you looking for someone in a positive way or a negative way?
I'd say positive way, to be honest with you.
Cam Johnson played really well offensively, and his offensive game is, has some highs and lows, but I don't think there's nothing that isn't repeatable from anybody outside of Booker dropping 40.
See, that's kind of my point. When you just see the production going down the line, real basic points first, right? Jay Crowder with 13. He was a -12, which is kind of crazy to think about. But shooting-wise, he did about what he did the entire Denver series and what he did the tail end of the Lakers series. That is something I've come to expect, nothing out of the ordinary. Bridges played a pretty standard Bridges game, efficient around the rim, okay from 3. He's real hot or cold. DA is doing exactly what he's done the entire series, incredibly efficient, everything at the rim. He tried a couple of his little 12-foot turnaround jumpers on the baseline, didn't hit, immediately went back to the rim, kept eating. Campaign, I think that's a repeatable performance without Chris Paul. I don't see that changing. This is so mean. I'm sorry. Dario going 0-1. I don't foresee that changing. I think he can do that again if he wants to. Sorry, man. Torrey Craig. This is an interesting one for me. The dude played 15 minutes and was a plus 18. That's that crazy energy. And I know there's 4 other dudes that impact that. But that's kind of what we've come to expect, right? Come in.
But I think that also speaks though to the weakness of the second unit for the Clippers though. Like, I think, and that also explains away Jay Crowder's minus 12 when he's on the court. Their starters are a very good starting 5, but anything after that, you're taking a huge step back. So it's no surprise that Jay would perform well with maybe a not so great plus minus and allow the bench players. I mean, all the bench players except for Etuan had plus, and it was almost plus double digits.
That's what I was going to say. It goes back to a formula we talked about so often, and it actually goes back to the bubble way back when, their last 8-0 win, 8-0 run. What we saw in the bubble was the Suns starters would kind of hold their own, and then the bench unit, which at the time, no offense, was this weird mishmash crap that should not have worked. They continued to outperform the other reserves and build a lead. And we saw that again against the Clippers, which was very odd to me because we hadn't seen that. And I think Chris Paul's absence is part of it. But you're looking at Crowder, Bridges, and Ayton, minus 12, minus 6, and minus 7, respectively. Campaign, who did play a lot with the reserve unit. Etuan got some run with the starters, which that looked pretty rough. Philip, I'll let you defend your boy there in a second. But Campaign plus 14, Torrey Craig plus 18, Cam Johnson plus 14, Dario plus 9, which that is – I'm not intelligent enough to go into how Dario was a plus 9 with his beautiful performance. But it was I think it's just a really, again, dumbed down analysis, but it's really clear to say, wow, our reserves, our bench unit just took care of business. Like every time they had that opportunity to either climb back into it when they had the early deficit, I think down 6 or 7 was about the max. But I mean, what can the Clippers do differently, Philip? Like, what can the Clippers take from game 1 and try to adjust? Because I feel like they already got kind of lucky with a few things, like DeMarcus Cousins, not going to catch you off guard next time. Paul George, great. What more do you want out of the guy other than maybe a little bit more efficient? But what can the Clippers do different in game 2?
I think it'll probably start with attacking the Suns from the perimeter. It didn't look like they got much going downhill at DA or putting DA on his heels very much. He had a couple of possessions where he had to come out and challenge 3-pointers or mid-range jumpers. He was dropping a little bit, but I think they need to make him work a little bit more. That's not the most taxing possession for a big man, to drop and then shuffle twice and stick your hand up. So I think you're going to see Jackson for sure, and probably this is where they're missing another ball handler so much. Maybe Man, putting them in pick and rolls and just telling them you have to get going downhill at DA to try to get him out of the game, because that just changes the dynamics of the Suns offense on the other end. They can't run that pick and roll that we've been talking about. Booker can't hunt out the mismatches as easily if DA is off the court, because if DA is off the court, Clippers go small, Suns have to go small, and now they're in business playing small ball. So I think that's the biggest thing that they can do. But simultaneously, you have to ask, are they going to shoot 43% from 3 in the playoffs while going downhill and attacking DA?
So that's one of the – I had a couple little stats written down this morning as this is interesting to me. And if you just tell me the Clippers were 14 of 17 from the free throw line, none of that really jumps out to you. They're the best free throw shooting team in the league. You're like, oh, they're efficient. They got to the line 17 times. Great. What stood out to me is that there's only one player who's not a center that shot a free throw for them, and that's Paul George. Paul George was 7 of 8. The only other 2 guys to even shoot free throws were Zubac and Cousins. That's a huge, huge red flag if I'm a Clippers fan, of telling me no one else was willing to go down there. And Ayton, good job. Don't foul, verticality, all that good stuff. I don't care if you drive it down with a little bit of actual intensity, you're going to get some, right? Paul George had it. A couple of his fouls were on jump shots. So I thought the same thing. The fact that Jackson and Mann, neither one had any free throws. I mean, Mann had, I think, 9 points, 3 of 4 from the field. So he only shot one shot that wasn't a three because he was 3 of 3 from behind the line. That's concerning if I'm a Clippers fan after watching their last series against the Jazz, where Mann was kind of their spark plug, athletic attacker off the dribble. Like maybe it's just because some of the wings for Utah didn't have the athleticism or length that the Suns do, but Mann was attacking those closeouts hard. I mean, he was yamming it on people. I mean, you don't score, what did he have, 39 or so without having something else, and he didn't have that something else. So again, you go back to should the Suns be that scared? Outside of Paul George, the only guys that concern me in that attacking role would be Mann and Jackson. That doesn't scare me too much. Ryan, in terms of what you saw in game one, go into game two, and I know you've kind of already prophesied of what's to come, which is a long/slow, painful death for them. I mean, is there anything you think they can do to steal a game other than just have Paul George go Super Saiyan on him?
It'll depend on if and when we get Chris Paul back. But if I'm the Clippers, I know Devin Booker has not a frequency, but he's easy to get under his skin. And we know that he's not a big fan of Patrick Beverley. If I'm the Clippers, I put Patrick Beverley in there to poke Booker a little bit and see if we can get Devin Booker in foul trouble.
The problem is Patrick Beverley is like, what's the opposite of kryptonite? Like, for real, when Booker has Beverley on him, it's like I forgot what you said, Philip. We were talking about this earlier. Yeah, it's like Booker's just
small.
He just licks his chops, and he's like,
and my thing is, it's Beverly's whole purpose would just need to be, I'm going to go in there and agitate Devin Booker until he throws a punch at me. Like, and Beverly's the kind of guy who can do that. But he would really have to bait Booker into it. Other than that, I don't think there's really anything.
The beauty of it is both of those players have an incredible amount of pride, and I only think one of those dudes can back it up right now. Because Patrick Beverley believes he is a number one perimeter defender, and I think the dude has lost a couple steps at this point. And so if you're saying we're going to throw our bulldog, we're going to throw Patrick Beverley, not a chance. The only way the Clippers are going to stop Devin Booker from doing exactly what he did is to put Paul George on him. And if you're going to have Paul George do that much defensively, he cannot carry that much of a workload on offense.
And
so
that's the thing.
They can't afford it, right?
The question is for the Clippers, can Paul George carry the series for us? The answer is no. And the answer is, I don't think they're getting Kawhi back. You and I have talked about this. I don't believe Kawhi will be back this series.
They've been weirdly hush-hush with that. When they mention ACL and then don't say anything else, that's weird. And you also know Kawhi's camp is weirdly hush-hush with every injury going back to the weird San Antonio days. I feel like we would have heard something resembling some positivity if he had a chance.
To quote the TikTok that's going around right now, Paul George, you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy. And I don't think he's got it in him to carry a Clippers series.
Well, and the thing with that is, on one end or the other, I think he could be that guy. If you say your responsibility on the defensive end is Devin Booker, I think Paul George could make life really hard on Devin Booker. But then to say you have to be that guy, and then on the other end, how many shots did he get up that game? 26 to get up 26 shots, 8 free throws. Like that's too much of a load for pretty much anybody in the league to bear. See Kevin Durant's game 7, the last couple of minutes of game 7 for that. When you're that guy on both ends of the court, it's impossible. So then what the Clippers have to do is, I think you have to develop a posture of anybody but Devin Booker. Anybody but Devin Booker. Devin Booker has proven himself the last 2 series that he will kill you if given the chance. I mean, he was cold-blooded in both his closeout games. He was cold-blooded in a big game 1 to set the tone yesterday. And I think you have to say it's not going to be you. I think they will have to blitz him And that's something that's a little bit scary because of how well the Suns can move the ball. But if it's a difference between Devin Booker getting a pull-up in the mid-range, going downhill at Zubac with Pat Beverly on his hip, or Jay Crowder shooting a three in the corner, I know what the stats say on this, but if I'm the Clippers or a Clippers fan, give me Jay Crowder shooting over Devin Booker mostly open. So I think eventually this series we see the Clips blitzing Booker, getting it out of his hand, and then the interesting part is going to be they're going to have to be disciplined enough for one of those defenders to stick right on Booker while everybody else zones up around him, and that is a tall task for a team.
Well, it's
for
also,
a team facing someone like the Suns.
And that's the only time the Suns, in my opinion, have shown weakness was against the Lakers in that series when they did that well, when they were blitzing Booker, but had the defensive prowess and length to properly zone out the shooters. And still, I mean, they couldn't have held that up forever, I don't think. They kind of caught Book maybe a little sleepy on that one. Like he wasn't expecting it for some reason. But I think if the Clippers try that, there's no way that works. But I agree. I think that's got to be the defensive adjustment. Like you've got to make someone else do something. And then I think offensively, we've already talked about it. They've just got to go downhill more. They can't rely on swinging around the perimeter, hoping something happens. They're going to have to force the issue. Again, I mean, I don't know if we made official predictions.
Here we go.
Philip has been
Let
on
me
fire.
be wrong again.
I believe Philip's Lakers prediction was Lakers in 6. I believe the Nuggets was Nuggets in 7.
It was in 5. It was Lakers in 5. It was Nuggets in 6.
That's remarkably worse. Philip, we'll start it with you. We get to cheat a little. We already get to see game 1. Where are you going with this one?
All right. I'm going to go with, this is like old baseball stuff to get a rally going. You rub the bill of your hat. I'm going to keep the mojo going, proper mojo, by
Clips
saying Clips in 7. I said Lakers in 5. It didn't. I was dead wrong. I said Nuggets in 6. So, hey, hopefully third time is not the charm. We'll go Clips in 7.
All right, Ryan, I already know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Suns in 6.
Whoa. Not what I was expecting. I thought Mr. Optimism was going to throw up the 4 and roll with it.
No, I Suns in 6. I'm trying to tamper my own optimism a little bit.
That's all right. I'll take it and run with it. My Vegas would be Suns in 4.5, which means I think my gut tells me 4 because and that's not to do with the Suns. It's to do with the Clippers to 100%. It is I don't see how this matchup works, but I'm going to give the Clippers 1. I'm going to go Suns in 5.
Gentleman sweep, huh?
I think so. I think they're going to be classy and let Paul George have one real good game. I mean, the thing is, he already did. I mean, he wasn't efficient, but he put up a lot of points. I don't see him dropping 50. Maybe he does. But do you think someone can drop 50 plus being guarded by Jay Crowder, Torrey Craig, and Mikal Bridges every single possession and expect the rest of your team to do much of anything? I sure don't. Like, maybe. I don't know. I think they would need to have another Terrence Mann drops 39 game. Like, they would need someone to come out of somewhere. Luke Kennard throws on
Kennard game.
Throws on his Duke jersey.
Like Kevin Huerter for the Hawks.
And, I mean, look, I don't get it. He got some minutes against the Jazz and looked good. Got a couple of minutes against the Suns, hit a couple shots. I think they're going to have to eventually start trying something. I'm curious to see what it is, though. But, man, Philip, one last thing, then we'll close it out. What you got?
Remember, this team has a habit of going down 0-2 and then all of a sudden starting to push all the right buttons. So I would say this series doesn't actually start until the Suns go up 2-0 and the series goes to LA.
One last note as we look this series and the next, based on the Sixers losing. And actually, no, I don't even think it had to do with that. I think it kind of got taken care of with the Jazz losing, my bad. The Suns have home court advantage for the rest of the playoffs at this point. That's kind of crazy. In a perfect world, the Suns and the Hawks are playing in the finals and your boy is hopping in his car and driving 5.5 hours to go watch the Suns play in the finals in Atlanta. But I will not start a fight because I'm a good boy and I don't like pouring beer on people or yelling at people. But I do look great wearing nothing but a Nash jersey, so I'll give him that.
There you go. Yeah, I think our parting words need to be Suns fans, stop fighting people.
Yeah, don't punch people.
It's not cool.
Just win games. That's all. Cheer, win games. Goodness gracious, what a mess. Anyway, oh boy. Guys, looking forward to tomorrow night. This will get, well, I guess for those listening, it'll be tonight. We'll have this posted Tuesday morning. So hopefully you give this a listen. Feel free to tweet at us. Let us know what you think about our predictions. Let us know what you think about Philip saying Clips in 7. But for Philip and Ryan, I am Ethan. This has been Into the Valley.
We out.